dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Men Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Men Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Men Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Men Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Men
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, talkamerica.radio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. There's a lot going on, and that includes a couple of things I'm really not going to talk about, so I'll let people know about that up front. I am not going to talk about Hurricane Harvey. This is primarily a political show that discusses my views, and a natural disaster is not a political event, not in my mind. Okay? So I'm not going to talk about that. There's one other topic I've already decided not to talk about, and right now I can't remember what it is. So we'll get started with what we are going to talk about, and that is Donald Trump pulling rank on transgenders. Now, you may remember back in July of 2016, you had this coming out of the previous administration, that of Barack Obama.
History and controversy as the Pentagon lifts its ban on transgender service members serving openly. It's a move being hailed by many, but questioned by others. The Republican head of the House Armed Services Committee says it's the Obama administration putting, quote, politics over policy. Our Pentagon correspondent Jim Miklaszewski tells us more.
After a year-long study, Defense Secretary Ash Carter has lifted the last gender-based barrier in the U.S. military.
I'm announcing today that we're ending the ban on transgender Americans in the United States military.
For the first time, as many as 12,000 transgender men and women now in the military will be able to openly serve without fear of being discharged, and transgender recruits will be accepted by the military services.
What it means is that transgender troops can serve openly. They don't have to live in fear. They don't have to lie about who they are.
I felt very betrayed.
Sage Fox first served in the Army as a male infantry soldier. But years later, after Sage was recruited into the Army Reserves as a transgender woman, she was quickly pushed out and put on inactive status.
It's fear, it's ignorance, it's bigotry, it's misinformation.
Lifting the current ban will not come fast or easy. The military services must come up with plans to provide psychological counseling and medical services for transgender forces, including hormone treatments. It could take a year before the plan is fully implemented. But as for Sage Fox, she's elated and looking forward to returning to active duty. Jim Miklaszewski, NBC News, the Pentagon.
Let's deal with that one for a minute here. Notice what is put in there. We have a policy where now we have to provide additional medical services that has nothing to do with readiness, by the way, for people who are now in the military. Now, remember, there's about 12,000, somewhere between, I think, 8 and 12,000 men and women in the military who identify as transgender. That out of a force of over 2.1 million active duty personnel. That's less than 1%. So what you want to do is make this change to accommodate less than 1% with something that by definition must be disruptive to the other 99%, because now they have to change policy in order to accommodate this microscopic minority. And you only need one in any unit to make everything disruptive. Here's one thing that we keep missing here. This is now, well, this is not a ban, a barrier to service anymore. Do you know that for Barack Obama to have done this, he had to step over policy in the military? MilitarySpot.com brought up enlisting requirements, which I thought was just fascinating. One of them, current or history of psychosexual conditions, including but not limited to transsexualism. Stop. But let's continue. Exhibitionism, transvestism, voyeurism, and other paraphilias are disqualifying. That is what he changed. These are problems. Now, if you haven't picked up on it yet, the military is letting you know that as far as they are concerned, transsexualism is a psychosexual disorder. It is a mental problem. It is something that needs to be treated, and we don't deal with that. They don't deal with hysteria. They don't deal with hypochondriacs. They don't deal with people who have chronic pain disorders. All these things are disqualifying. For all these other things that you can treat people for, but it is disruptive. You have to have other things on hand, but they would affect readiness as well. You mean to tell me you're going to give somebody hormone treatments to actually try to affect who they are on a hormonal level, on a biological identity level, but that has nothing to do with... Wow. I really don't believe that at all. Navy.army.com, in their section about what you can have and cannot have in order to join. Can't be pregnant and join. But psychiatric conditions that are disqualifying: schizophrenia, major depression, bipolar disorder, panic disorders, sexual disorders, and personality disorders. Really? Are you catching on here? You know what the thing that's most disturbing to me is the reluctance of people inside and outside the military and the government to identify transsexualism as what the American Psychiatric Association has known it to be for decades. Psychiatry.org, talking about gender dysphoria, which is a clinical term to deal with transsexualism or transgenderism. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5, that's the latest version, provides for one overarching diagnosis of gender dysphoria with separate specific criteria for children and adults. Let's back up. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Do you really want me to go into a discussion of why I want people with a known mental disorder, why I don't want them to serve in the military? They have something that needs to be treated. The military is not the place where you cure mental disorders. You may cause a few of them because combat is rough. But that's not the place where you send people to be cured or treated for their mental disorders. So Donald Trump reversed the policy.
President Donald Trump on Friday signed a memorandum directing the military not to move forward with a plan to allow transgender individuals to join. The presidential memorandum also banned the Department of Defense from using its resources to provide medical treatment regimens for transgender individuals currently serving in the military, offering an uncertain future for transgender service members currently serving. Trump also directed the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to determine how to address transgender individuals currently serving based on military effectiveness and lethality. Unitary military, cohesion, budgetary constraints, applicable law, and all factors that may be relevant. The White House official who briefed reporters on the memo on Friday evening declined to say whether transgender troops would be allowed to remain in the military under those policy guidelines. The guidance comes a month after Trump said on Twitter that he would reinstate a ban on transgender troops, an announcement that took many in the military's leadership, including the Joint Chiefs of Staff, by surprise.
If you look at all the things that are listed, and you can find them, medical and mental disorders that are disqualifying, transsexualism is one of myriad. There are hundreds that can keep you out of the military. Amazingly, the Obama administration zeroed in on that one and did not talk about all the other people who have mental or medical problems who, even if you let them in, would be less disruptive than somebody who doesn't know what sex they're opposite. So very clearly, and this pause will continue indefinitely, openly transgender individuals will be barred until the Secretary of Defense provides a recommendation to the contrary that the president finds convincing. Now, I don't know that Mad Dog Mattis is going to spend a lot of time trying to convince the president about this. Despite what people are crying about, he's not kicking anyone out of the military who is transgender and already serving. He's simply saying that medical support, where we're giving you hormone therapy and maybe reassignment surgery at the expense of the taxpayer, that's done. That's not happening anymore. So it really comes down to this. For those transgenders who are in the military, they're not being asked to leave the military, but anyone who wants to join the military and has already identified themselves as transgender, you're not getting in. So for those who are in, you have a simple choice as to which thing you love most. Either the country that God gave you to serve, or the gender that he did not give you to desire. Whichever one means the most to you will dictate how much and how long of a military career you're going to have. There is not going to be a backlash in Middle America about this because they had a bigger problem with lifting the ban in the first place. If you have a problem with this, I understand it. But you're in the minority, and there's a reason for that. Well, this means Donald Trump's not supporting the LGBT community. No, it means he's not putting them ahead of the American community. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM in North Florida, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, President Donald Trump pardoned Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Sheriff Arpaio, bless his heart, had been convicted of criminal contempt of a federal judge's order. And of course, he was facing jail time, serious jail time, to be honest with you. 6 months. I say it's serious because Joe Arpaio's 85 years old. Once you get to 80 and on, you don't need a reason to check out of here. You could be gone at any time. So 6 months of jail time for an 80-year-old man is significant. The likelihood that he would have received any jail time, first-time offender, stellar record, public servant, etc., in normal circumstances would be low. All those things mitigated against the idea in the minds of many, including those who consider themselves Republicans. There's no reason to pardon this man. He probably wasn't going to get jail time. If he did get jail time, he would probably get something less than the maximum of 6 months. But Donald Trump didn't listen to any of that. He simply pardoned the man. This is the issue here. It's called principle. What Joe Arpaio did was uphold federal law. What he did not do was comply with a federal judge's order, which is simply put, not law. He did what he could to protect the citizens of his county, which is Maricopa County in Arizona. He did what he could, and he did it for 24 years. Rising to fame, this is the guy who made inmates wear pink underwear, gave them bologna sandwiches, and people called it cruel and unusual punishment. Of course, the truth of the matter is, if you know that if you go to jail in Maricopa County, that you're going to be walking around in pink underwear and eat nothing but bologna sandwiches, what's the likelihood that you want to do anything that's going to get you in the Maricopa County jail? That's the part that people miss. You don't make it comfortable for criminals to spend time in jail unless you want to see them there. Now, you're not going to stop certain people from going to jail? No, you're not. But there's no reason for it to be a pleasant experience. There's no reason for it to be relaxing. There's no reason for it to be enjoyable. It is called jail. It is called incarceration for the sake of punishment. This is how CNN covered, with a brief announcement, the pardon of Sheriff Arpaio.
The president has decided, the White House just released a statement saying the president has decided to pardon Sheriff Joe Arpaio of Arizona. Obviously, this was very controversial. They made a big deal about the fact that the president was not going to do it when he was in Phoenix, Arizona for a rally, although while he was on stage, Trump hinted that he believed Arpaio would be fine in the long run. And in fact, we learned earlier this week that the White House had paperwork ready for this pardon. Now, in this statement, the White House lays out Arpaio's history of military service, his career in law enforcement, and I just want to read you the last line of it. In it, the president says, Sheriff Joe Arpaio is now 85 years old, and after more than 50 years of admirable service to our nation, he is a worthy candidate for a presidential pardon. Now, the reason he needs a presidential pardon is because a court held him in criminal contempt for violating a judge's order in a racial profiling case and for continuing to target immigrants in terms of traffic stops.
Let's remember something. He's convicted of a misdemeanor offense. Guess what entering the country illegally also is? It's a misdemeanor, not a felony. And the majority of people, the vast majority of people who enter this country illegally, breaking the law and committing that misdemeanor, never even see the inside of a courtroom, let alone get a jail sentence of any kind. So the worst you can say is that Joe Arpaio was treated no worse than the people he was accused of doing harm to. He's not going to jail. The vast majority of them aren't even apprehended, let alone going to jail. Of course, this was a monumental event in the minds of some. Let's hear first from the sheriff himself, who appeared on Hannity. Remember, the pardon actually came as Hurricane Harvey was coming ashore in Texas, so there's a lot going on. But here's how he responded to the pardon when he spoke with Sean Hannity.
Major breaking news tonight. President Trump has in fact pardoned former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Remember, he was convicted last month of only criminal contempt. Now we're going to keep showing Steve Harrigan, who's on the ground in Texas tonight, Corpus Christi, in just a second. But this was moments ago, the video you'll be seeing. But on the phone joining us, I believe his first interview, former Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio. First of all, Sheriff, I'm very relieved for you. You're 85 years old. You have dedicated your entire life to public service. You came under fire for obeying what are the laws of the land. I applaud the president for what he did tonight. It was the right thing to do, and he telegraphed he was going to do it the other night. But hearing it tonight, how did it feel?
Well, it's great. I love that president. He supports law enforcement, and I'm very humble. If you recall, 2 years ago, I supported him, and I said publicly recently, pardon or no pardon, I will be with him to the end. And I'm going to have a news conference early next week and get to the bottom of this and show the abuse of the judicial system in politics. I'm not going down without trying to defend myself to all those people that don't like what I've done.
Yeah, Sheriff, it's got to be daunting after all those years of public service that here you are, facing a potential year in jail. And, I've known you for many, many years, sir. And I remember when you stood up and you said, wait a minute, these are the laws of the land. I'm a law enforcement officer. I'm sworn to uphold the laws of the land. Others that were also have sworn to uphold the laws of the land. are not doing it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Isn't that really the root of the troubles for you?
Yeah, after all these years, 55 years in law enforcement around the world, and here I am on the defense table because they wanted to do everything to get rid of me, certain people, and I'll discuss that more next week. It's my wife's birthday. I just left the spaghetti and meatballs for you. So 60 years marriage and now birthday, and here, this is a good present for her, too, believe me.
I believe it. Well, listen, that's certainly better than what you could have been facing. If you ended up in one of your own jails, you'd have pink underwear and a bologna sandwich that cost 50 cents. And,
well, it's federal. Sean, it's federal. I could play
be club fed?
Yeah, 3 meals a day. So it would have been all right.
three in a cot, right?
Yeah.
All right, on a serious note, give us a headline of the abuse of the judiciary before we get back to Steve Harrigan on the ground in Corpus Christi tonight.
Well, first of all, you're a great journalist who kind of broke the story. He's a lawyer, too. But I'm going to discuss all that with my lawyer. I think people will be shocked. They probably won't believe it. Certain news media are trying to destroy me all these years. But we'll see. We'll try to get the message out Monday or Tuesday. All
right, Sheriff, our best to you and your wife. Thank you for all the years of service. I'm relieved for you, for your wife, for your family. And I'm glad that the president, he did the right thing. There's no question about it. And I'm sure he'll take heat, but he's a man of conviction, as we've all learned, and he is not going to be compliant to what people want him to be. And I think that's why people admire him so much. Sheriff, all my prayers, all the best, sir, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
The president is a man of conviction, and he did what he thought was the right thing. Now, personally, I agree. Let's also understand this. This is people who are for no sovereignty for the citizens of the United States and for the country itself. This is them against the United States, and this was their scalp, even though it was an 85-year-old man getting a misdemeanor conviction that was only worth 6 months in jail. What Donald Trump pardoned wasn't significant from a legal standpoint, wasn't significant from a criminal standpoint. It was only significant in a culture war standpoint. And that war is between organizations like MALDEF and La Raza and other left-leaning immigrant groups who basically believe that the United States should have no ability to police its borders against those who willingly and intentionally violate it for their benefit and often for the harm of the people in the United States. Let's not forget that during the Obama administration, the federal government posted signs in areas of Arizona telling citizens to stay out of there because they knew what was going on there, and they had no intention of going in and defending the territory of the United States. Now, not surprisingly, after the pardon was announced, the detractors, particularly those on the left, had something negative to say about what Donald Trump had done.
For a president that claims to be a rule of law president, he's done the opposite. He's ignored what this court behind us said, and he's moved to pardon a criminal.
The court deemed him a criminal, but this president, the community had to tell him to follow the rule of law. That's disgusting. That's not my president, and we should be ashamed.
Sheriff Arpaio, I want you to not accept the pardon. You violated the law, you engaged in racial profiling, now it's time for you to pay the piper.
Yeah. Put that together with Paul Ryan, who disagrees with the pardon, with John McCain, who disagrees with the pardon, and all the normal rhinos that you can think of who have a problem with this pardon. Let me help you guys out. The Republican Party does not have the support of the American people. The office of the president currently has the support of the American people. For that reason, you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, at how many Republicans are sitting on the sidelines and have nothing to say about the Arpaio pardon, because they probably, more of them than you would like to believe, lean in favor of saying this was a terrible thing and you shouldn't have done this. Jan Brewer, the former governor of Arizona, said you should have waited till the sentencing, which doesn't even make any sense. If you're going to pardon the guy, what difference does it make to wait for the sentence? If he's pardoned, he's pardoned. Understand what's going on. Donald Trump is standing up for the things that he said he would, which happens to have the support of the American people. Those on the left who control the media, and quite a few politicians, more than you imagine, don't want the legal system to be used for anything other than advancing their agenda. Remember, it's the federal courts who found fault with Trump's travel ban, even though there was no legal reason for there to be fault with it. Arpaio was pardoned. He should have been pardoned. If you want to fight this battle, you need to fight it at the ballot box, not in the courtroom, where you are going to manipulate a few people to basically negate the will of the majority. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com. And WLBB, News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, we do have the interesting phenomenon now that Democrats are in the position of defending racial discrimination. Yes, they are. National Review, not NPR. National Review published an article. Democrats pressure the federal government to support racial discrimination. This came out on the 25th of August. A letter from Dianne Feinstein and colleagues misses the mark. Here's what we have. Top Democrats in Congress are pressuring the Justice Department and the Education Department to stop the administration's plans to investigate and potentially sue universities that intentionally discriminate against applicants based on race. Why would a Democrat not want to stop a university from discriminating against applicants on the basis of... In their letter to Attorney General Sessions and Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, Senator Feinstein, Representative John Conyers of Michigan, and others indicated that curtailing racial discrimination would undermine civil rights protections. Let me get this straight. In the mind of Democrats in the federal government, you must have racial discrimination if you're going to have civil rights protections. Is anybody hearing that right? Now, don't get me wrong. I understand how leftists can twist this to make it sound appropriate. Well, we have to do something about all the discrimination of the past. The discrimination of the past, one, is not happening. The discrimination of the past does not justify discriminating against people in the present who had nothing to do with the discrimination of the past. Now, you might think we're talking about white people. No, we're not. Earlier this month, the New York Times published an internal Department of Justice memo recruiting attorneys to work on a project. A justice spokeswoman confirmed that the department is looking into allegations that some schools discriminate against Asian American applicants. Asian American organizations filed a discrimination complaint against Harvard and other universities in 2015, but President Obama ignored it. Just like he ignored in 2009 the fact that the new Black Panther Party had been convicted of voter intimidation and took no measures against that because the discrimination was not something he had a problem with. In the same way, Asian Americans came out and said, we are being treated unfairly based on our race, and Hope and Change said, you have no hope for change. I'm ignoring your complaint. In response, the Democrats decry any effort to limit universities' ability to take students' background, including their race, into account during the admissions process. But when 130 Asian American organizations asked the Education and Justice Departments to investigate Yale, Brown, and Dartmouth for race-based quotas that lock out well-qualified Asian American applicants, they presented data showing that on average, Asian Americans must have SAT scores that are 140 points higher than white students, 270 points higher than Hispanic students, and 450 points higher than black students to even have a shot at admission to the schools. So it doesn't matter that you're better. You have to, 450 points on an SAT score? My goodness. You get a few hundred points just for putting your name on the This is ridiculous. Now that's blatant. It's discrimination. Should it be allowed to continue? Of course not. KXAN in Texas published this report regarding possible race discrimination at the University of Texas.
The Trump administration could soon be looking into the University of Texas over its admission policy. The Justice Department is moving people into a new team to investigate intentional race-based discrimination in college admission. KXAN's political reporter Phil Prazen shows the civil rights groups are worried that could crack down on UT's policy of using race as a factor in choosing students.
Austin president of the NAACP, Nelson Linder, says education is the key weapon to reconcile historical wrongs.
If you don't have access to quality education, these disparities, they're going to continue. If you want to stop it, you've got to guarantee that folks have education opportunities.
He's worried the Justice Department will look to end policies helping black and Hispanic Texans get into college.
I mean, that's frightening. The Department of Justice, Department of Injustice, I mean, they have a lot of power. That's the government saying we're going to flip-flop on our policies. That ought to be alarming.
This could reignite a debate that has ran right through the city of Austin, specifically here on the campus of the University of Texas. Last year, the Supreme Court upheld UT's policy of using race as a factor in determining admissions, defeating Abigail Fisher, who sued after she was denied. The group Students for Fair Admission sued UT again under the Texas Constitution.
It's not right to inflict one wrong to try to correct for another wrong.
Volunteer Executive Director Corey Liu hopes that the administration files a court brief in their favor.
We're all citizens and we have equal rights and we should have equal opportunity without our government sorting us based on our race.
When asked for a comment, UT Austin referred to University President Greg Fendes's comments on the lawsuit that they believe in and will defend their admission policy. Phil Prazen, KXAN News.
The New York Times originally reported the story based on an internal memo from the Department of Justice. Today at the White House press briefing, the president's spokeswoman said whoever leaked that information to the Times violated DOJ policy, and they do not confirm or deny possible investigations, but would always review any evidence of racial discrimination. Taking a closer look at who gets into UT Austin. This year, the university must automatically admit students in the top 7% of their high school class. That will fill up 75% of the slots at UT Austin. The other 25% is filled by the university. They select qualified students based on class rank, test scores, prior coursework, personal achievement, resumes, letters of recommendation, race, and ethnicity.
What black people went crazy about so long ago and fought for, and you go all the way back to Brown versus Board of Education, the same wrongs about which they complained, they are now defending that those wrongs be practiced against another group, and they are experiencing that harm on the basis of their race. Let's dismiss this nonsense of, well, you have to guarantee. You don't have to guarantee educational opportunities for anyone except though this is supposed to be a merit-based society. I don't want everybody going to college. I want the best people who can do something of benefit to all Americans. I want them getting into the top spots at the top colleges because they are the best. I do not want to take somebody And I know how this is going to sound. I'm not looking to take somebody from the barrio who barely made it out of high school, if they did, and stick them into Harvard. I'm not looking to snatch somebody straight out of Compton and put them into Yale just because they're black enough to satisfy some liberal professor. That does not help the country. You know what else? It doesn't help the kids to whom you do this. That's another thing that people really don't want to discuss. The Heritage Foundation published an article back in August of 2015, A Dubious Expediency, How Race Preferential Admissions Policies on Campus Hurt Minority Students. Well, you just heard about what these policies are doing to Asian American students at Brown, at Yale, at the University of Texas. But that's not what we're talking about. In the executive summary of this report, it reads as follows. Mounting empirical research shows that race preferential admission policies are doing more harm than good. Instead of increasing the number of African Americans entering high-status careers, these policies reduce those numbers relative to what we would have had if colleges and universities had followed race-neutral policies. We have fewer African American scientists, physicians, and engineers, and likely, they don't say it, they're not definitive on that, but likely fewer lawyers and college professors. If, as the evidence indicates, the effects of race preferential admissions policies are exactly the opposite of what was originally intended, it is difficult to understand why anyone would wish to support them rather than adhere to the principle of color blindness. Because liberals and progressives abhor the idea of color blindness. The base of their political power is identity politics that includes color and ethnicity. They're not going to change this, not willingly. They're not going to say we're all Americans when it comes down to competition for limited opportunities. That is not in the makeup of progressives. That is not in the makeup of liberals. It is not in the makeup of Black Lives Matter. It is not in the makeup of Antifa. It is not in the makeup of any left-leaning person in these United States. They will not say that everybody should be able to compete on that level playing field. Well, the field's not level. Therefore, the best and best qualified should be denied opportunities. And you consider that American? How? How? And when someone looks into the fact that people who are highly qualified and have to have an SAT score, when I was going through school, 1600 was the top SAT score. I think it's moved higher since then. But to have a score that's 450 points higher than somebody else, which basically means if a black kid got a 1150 on an SAT, then an Asian child had no shot at getting in because you'd have to score higher than the highest test score available. So what's the point in trying if your best leaves you outside? And that's what affirmative action and race-based policies have always done to the best qualified. And that's part of what it's intended to do, to diminish the willingness to put forth your best effort because you know the game is rigged. Well, we're not talking about white folks right now. We're talking about Asians. We're not talking about black folks right now. We're talking about Asians. If you think it's okay to keep somebody from going to the school of their choice when they're better qualified than the folks that are being admitted, and you think that's appropriate, you're not an American. You're a liberal, you're a progressive, but you're not an American. That's not the way it's supposed to work. But the reason it works that way is it helps liberals and progressives acquire and hold on to what political power they have. The fact that it's not working, the fact that you're sending kids into, think about this. If somebody with a SAT score 450 points higher than yours is not allowed into a school that accepts you, What does that say about your likelihood of doing well at that school? Which is the problem with these affirmative action, race-based admissions policies. They take people who are not good candidates for these schools and put them in there so they can puff their chests out and say how progressive they are and how sensitive they are to the plight of minorities. And they set the kids up to fail because you're not going to go to those classes for them. They're not trying to dumb down the curriculum just because you came from Compton, just because you came out of East LA. They're not trying to do these things. They're trying to say you're just as good as anybody else. The truth of the matter is you're just as good as anybody else, but you've never been prepared for that environment, and therefore your lack of preparation is going to catch you. And as a result, you discourage people and you depress the numbers of successful Black, Latino, and other minority children moving out of high school and seeking to get higher level degrees. It's wrong. Donald Trump, whatever you think about him, has said, you know what, we ought to look at it, because if it's wrong, we ought to look at it. And the Democrat Party, the bastion of civil rights and civil liberties, says, you can't look at that. Oh, no, you need to drop that investigation. We don't need to look at that. We have these policies in place. The policies are in place not to ensure that the best and the brightest get their opportunity, but to ensure that those who will vote for us will be able to put their children in there, whether or not those children can do the job or not. And therefore, they and their children will vote for me because we at least gave them a shot, even though they couldn't handle it. If you don't see the insidious evil of this, I don't know what to tell you. It's wrong. We shouldn't be doing it. And if Donald Trump can stop this, he has done every American a favor. But he's going to have to fight as hard for this as he probably would have to fight for repealing and replacing Obamacare. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Has anybody heard anything recently from Maria ChappellNadal? She is the Missouri State Senator who got herself into a bit of a tight spot by expressing on Facebook, on her private page, that she hoped that the president would be assassinated. And that prompted a strong response from other elected officials in the state. Here's how a local Missouri TV station reported on these events.
5 words on Facebook could get Missouri State Senator Maria ChappellNadal kicked out of office. The senator posted a message hoping President Trump would be assassinated. Russell Kinsall is live in Ferguson detailing the new movement to force her out. Russell?
Steve, I reached out to the governor's office to ask if Governor Greitens supports a special session to remove Senator ChappellNadal from office. Still waiting on that response, but I put calls out to numerous state senators, and here in her district, constituents had a mixed response to today's new developments. On Sunday, State Senator Maria ChappellNadal issued another apology for her comment.
I want to make this apology to our president and his family. President Trump, I apologize to you and your family.
But she again refused to step down. Senate Democratic leaders stripped her of her committee assignments. Republican Senator Paul Weiland of Jefferson County told me she's not going to be a very effective legislator without those assignments, but he said she won't be powerless. Then we learned that Republican Lieutenant Governor Mike Parson sent a letter to senators that said, I'm calling on the Missouri Senate to go into special session in conjunction with veto session with the purpose of expelling Senator ChappellNadal. Some of her constituents told me they don't support a call for her to be expelled from office.
I'm split down the middle. I know she shouldn't have said it. I doubt if she literally meant it. I think she could do more good in office than out.
I feel like she shouldn't be fired. She's just saying what we were thinking.
I spoke with Republican Senator Dave Schatz, who said he wishes Chappelle-Nadal would resign for writing what she did, but he said if she's not willing to do that, it's incumbent upon our body to take the necessary steps to remove her from office. And he said he feels the same way if it was a Republican or a Democrat. One voter said it's not uncommon for people to get fired over what they post online. Just a short time ago, I spoke with Democratic State Senator Jill Shoop, who said that the comments that Chappelle-Nadal made were horrific, but because she's apologized, admitted her mistakes, she believes maybe the punishment might be more appropriate if it's a censure. She does not support an expulsion for Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal. Live in Ferguson, Russell Kinsall, News 4.
If the state Senate came together for a special session, it would cost taxpayers. The special session racks up about $9,000 per day in the state Senate. Most of that is for the nearly $114 given to lawmakers for daily expenses. Other costs include things like staffing and operational expenses in the Capitol building.
I always like how when those on the left get themselves in trouble and doing something about it is actually a possibility, all of a sudden the costs associated with it become an issue for the media. Well, if they come together to expel her, it's going to cost this much money. Would you have this same response when you are looking to get rid of, say, a Republican legislator who had gone out there and made some type of tweet in support of white nationalism? Would anybody be concerned about the cost? Of course not. It's just a terrible evil that we have to address. And calling for someone to be assassinated is just, oh, well, they made a mistake. Really? And, of course, people do lose their jobs for what they post online. Why should someone who is supposed to be in a position of public trust be spared that which the rest of the public is exposed to for doing much less, saying things much less offensive than calling for the death of the President of the United States? Now, for those who aren't aware, this is not her first instance of running afoul of other people in authority. You may recall she is the state senator who represents Ferguson, Missouri. And back during the riots, there was this incident.
And tonight's meetings follow a weekend of small but high-profile protests, one during the Cardinals game on Sunday, the other on Saturday. It stopped traffic on Florissant Road in Ferguson.
Missouri State Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal has been taking a prominent role in recent protests and in online comments about the protest movement. News 4's Russell Kinsall taking a closer look at her actions. Russell's live outside one of the town hall meetings in Ferguson.
Yes, Steve, town hall meetings like this are intended to bring the community together, but they'll have to work past the lingering frustration from last weekend's protest where Police Chief Tom Jackson says a state senator escalated tension in a situation he worried that could turn violent. Did she make the statement that we're going to shut down this road with or without you?
Yes, she said they were going to do that.
Chief Tom Jackson says the statement came during a protest Saturday outside the police station. Demonstrators were blocking traffic, and at one point a driver refused to turn around, pulled forward, and bumped protesters. Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal responded with a tweet in all caps calling all protesters. Some saw it as having the potential to increase an already angry crowd and increase the risk of violence. She disagrees.
When I heard about my intern being run over by a car, I was alarmed. And so because there were other calls out, I did a call as well because we should be supporting each other.
The chief says the senator told him if he didn't shut down the street, demonstrators would.
Telling me that we needed to shut the street down is not helping. We can't continuously shut down major thoroughfares. So what I was looking for was help in de-escalating the situation.
The chief is a liar. He's a flat-out liar.
Chappelle-Nadal says she merely suggested shutting down the street, a practice the police department has done in the past, which would give protesters the time to cool down.
So if you can please shut down the street and then let everyone go ahead and do their protesting, it would save us a lot of problems later on.
Maybe it was just miscommunication or proof of a disconnect or an example of the growing frustration over these disruptive protests. But hopefully this meeting tonight can get past the frustration and get the community closer to healing. Live in Ferguson, Russell Kinsall, News 4.
Both of those clips I played, those are from the same news organization and the same on-scene reporter. They are just enamored of Maria Chappelle-Nadal and don't want any harm to come to her, even though the woman is clearly out of control and has been for some time. The chief is a liar, flat-out liar, really. Now, we have another thing that's going on that's strange because on Sunday, this very past Sunday, a very rich conservative political donor went to sit down for brunch with Maria Chappelle-Nadal. The gentleman's name is Feigns. His name is Foster Feigns. And he got a cup of coffee with her, and he has this process. He's got a campaign of return to civility. Let me help you out. Foster Feigns is, by definition, a progressive. Civility is how we got into this mess. I don't need a return to civility. What I need is a return to liberty. Now, his idea is that let's go ahead and everybody sit down with somebody they disagree with, and let's find this common ground. And then he wants to talk about forgiveness. I have no problem with forgiveness, but I also have no problem with consequence. I'll be happy to forgive Maria ChappellNadal as soon as she relinquishes her seat in the Missouri State Senate. Let her go. I have no problem forgiving her. But if that's what you're going to do, somebody else should have the seat. It's that simple. Doesn't mean I'm mad at you. You're not the right person. But this gentleman who has a lot of money, and he has a big campaign where he's urging his followers to go out. He's actually offering $25 to the first 1,000 people who participate in his campaign if they share a photo of their copy meeting and use the hashtag return to civility. So far, less than 400 people have participated in the first day or so, and I'm glad that the American people, despite the fact that they may follow this gentleman, are up to understanding what this is about. Civility is not the problem because there's only one side that's incivil. Those who are on the right in America, and we're not talking about the alt-right or the white nationalists who are neither left nor right, to be honest with you. They're just crazy. But they're not the ones who start these arguments. They're not the ones who publish these polls. They're not the ones who call other people crazy. They're not the ones who look for every potential negative thing to say about someone. That comes from the left. Therefore, their calls for civility are calls for you to normalize and accept their behavior. If you do that, you continue to degrade your cause and you degrade this country. I'm not looking to be civil toward anyone on the left. We will deal with truth or we won't deal at all. Well, you're contributing to the divide. No, the divide's already there. I am not going to relinquish my position in pursuit of a fake common ground. Maria ChappellNadal is apologizing, and Feigns said, well, I applaud her courage. This isn't courage, it's desperation. She doesn't want to get put out. So she made a sighting, having coffee with a white guy, who just managed to pick her out of all the people out there, and he's in a totally different state, to come in and talk. You don't think this is a setup, huh? Wow. Okay. But I'm going to turn this over to my good friend, Ron Edwards. And after that, we'll be back with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
Are congressional leaders capable of governing for the good of the republic? Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, it is obvious that congressional leaders and others disdain President Trump so much they are risking losing their seats in the 2018 midterm election. They don't even want to protect our sovereignty with a border wall to keep out illegal immigrants. They, along with their dragon media pals, denigrate the president, who has presented many great ideas to improve our national quality of life. But the globalist Republicans and the leftist Democrat Party colleagues only seem to specialize in doing nothing but dragging their feet and irritating the president. After all, they had 8 long years to bring forth plans to return great medical care to America. I never heard of Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, Senator Collins, or any other rhinos giving a fraction of the opposition to Obama's harmful policies and sometimes inaccurate or negative remarks as they have exhibited toward Trump. Perhaps their globalist or do-nothing worthwhile philosophy is more important to them than actually earning their decent taxpayer-funded salaries and do something like legislation. Oh, but they can't allow doing the right thing to get in the way of their war against Trump. My bad. I'm Ron Edwards.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Men Thinkin.
Freedom is never more
more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Men Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Men Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Men Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Men Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, the CHAG, which is my quote-unquote affectionate name for Hillary Clinton, has a book that is coming out on the 12th of September entitled What Happened, as though nobody knows. We all know what happened. But it recalls parts of the most recent campaign, which she was supposed to win, and said in some video clip that she was wondering why she wasn't 50 points ahead. Well, she wasn't 50 points ahead because she was Hillary Clinton. But nevertheless, this book, which I'm sure will sell to somebody and make Ms. Clinton more money, is also made into an audiobook, excerpts of which were played on MSNBC's Morning Joe recently. Here is one clip about I believe it's the October debate that was held between her and now President Donald Trump.
This is not okay, I thought. It was the second presidential debate, and Donald Trump was looming behind me. 2 days before, the world heard him brag about groping women. Now we were on a small stage, and no matter where I walked, he followed me closely, staring at me, making faces. It was incredibly uncomfortable. He was literally breathing down my neck. My skin crawled. It was one of those moments where you wish you could hit pause and ask everyone watching, well, what would you do? Do you stay calm, keep smiling, and carry on as if he weren't repeatedly invading your space? Or do you turn, look him in the eye, and say loudly and clearly, back up, you creep, get away from me. I know you love to intimidate women, but you can't intimidate me, so back up. I chose option A. I kept my cool, aided by a lifetime of dealing with difficult men trying to throw me off. I did, however, grip the microphone extra hard. I wonder, though, whether I should have chosen option B. It certainly would have been better TV. Maybe I have overlearned the lesson of staying calm, biting my tongue, digging my fingernails into a clenched fist, smiling all the while, determined to present a composed face to the world.
That is one incredible account, I have to admit. What you want me to believe is that Donald Trump intimidated. Did he intimidate you when you went to his wedding? Did he intimidate you all the times that you guys were at different social events? Were you intimidated then? Are you trying to say the first time that, as long as you've known Donald Trump, the first time that you knew he had a particular fondness for women was not until 2016? Is that what you want me to believe? Seriously? Come on now. And to say that he didn't intimidate you, then why are you writing the book? Basically saying that your skin crawls. People who aren't intimidated, their skin doesn't crawl. What was I supposed to do with somebody invading my space, you write? Really? What did George W. Bush do with an Al Gore who strode confidently across the debate platform to stand within 5 feet of George W. Bush? Well, George W. Bush is a man. You're not. George W. Bush is a Texan. You're not. And George W. Bush was not the least bit intimidated. You were. He looked at Gore up and down, nodded to him, and continued speaking his point. He didn't make an issue of the other person on stage because he wasn't trying to get them to vote for him. So, this really isn't a very long topic, not for me anyway. Let's be clear about this. Hillary Clinton. You're supposed to be the most admired woman on the planet, at least that's what your supporters believe, but you have never won a national contest. You're supposed to be one of the world's most admired women, one of the smartest people on the planet, yet you have never won a national contest where your status would be validated as such. You got punked out of the 2008 nomination after they put that sucker on a platter for you for all you endured during the Clinton presidency. They tried to hand it to you, and you got beat by a mulatto nobody. And then not only did you get beat by him, you went to work for him. But you have no problem with difficult men. Oh, and that reminds me, you and he went missing in action the night the Benghazi 4 got killed. And then Mr. Hope and Change made you and that Rice chick pimp some nonsense about a video to the entire nation. But you're not intimidated at all. How does somebody who doesn't intimidate you get you to tell a bald-faced lie to the... Oh, that's right, you're a Clinton. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, then you quit the administration after the first term, after you've done a bunch of damage. And not only, and speaking of damage, you ended up with brain damage. And you ran from the Senate for a while so they wouldn't ask you questions about what happened in Libya. Isn't that wonderful? So you lay low, kinda, while you and the Democrat National Committee come up with another scheme to make sure that you can actually be the Democrat nominee for president, because we know that you can follow up after Barack Obama and continue our progressive globalist agenda. So you and Debbie Wasserman Schultz go out and cheat socialist Bernie Sanders so a non-Democrat wouldn't be out there kicking a bone out of your behind going for the Democrat nomination. And after you cheat him, you buy him a house. $600,000 summer home. I don't know where he got the car that he's driving. Very expensive car. You know, the type of thing the top 1% that he and you tend to be opposed to, even though both of you fit into that category. Well, you got Bernie out of the way, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz running interference for you kept any other possible Democrat from even being considered in the race. So you're there, and everybody is ready for the coronation. You're supposed to, people are predicting up until the day of the election that it could be an electoral landslide for you, and then you end up getting embarrassed in a general election that you were supposed to win. Despite that, what you want to do in your book is tell the world how some guy that you know and who'd never been a serious candidate for dog catcher in any jurisdiction, no political experience at all before, well, that's not true. No elected experience at all. This guy had you clutching the pearls on a debate stage. You who've been first lady, you who've been a senator, You who've been a Secretary of State, a political nobody, has you clutching your pearls. Got it. And of course, you're used to dealing with difficult men and not being intimidated, and that's why you've been enabling your serial rapist husband for more than 3 decades. Now, he's got a 5-decade history, but you ain't been with him all those years. But ever since you two got together, you are the cleanup crew when he goes out and puts himself in a situation he's got no business with a woman who's not his wife. But you're a strong woman, right? Hillary Clinton, every man who challenges you makes you either his personal female canine, makes you dishonest, or has you scared. The problem is you wanted to think somebody with your pedigree, your background, your character, and your demeanor should be President of the United States. Get out of here with that. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, Talk America Radio at talkamericaradio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Let me help you as much as I can on this topic. The American people have been deceived into softness. And as a result, they are slow to respond to the violence that's coming from the left that is in this country. I don't call them the American left because there's nothing American about them. But the issues are just myriad. What was the response to Ferguson from America? Nothing. What was the response to the violence in Baltimore from Americans? Nothing. What was the response to people chanting in New York? What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them? Now. What was the response from America to Black Lives Matter? They have more cop blood on their hands. 2 in Brooklyn. 5 in Dallas. More in Louisiana and elsewhere. The toll and the response from America against the left for their violence has been what? Well, those guys died. You don't get it. It's not about an individual person. They're expendable. They are cannon fodder. That's exactly how the left teaches and treats their people. Our cause is greater than you. Go out and do what you must. And if you go down, we will. There's no difference between them and ISIS. There's no difference between them and Islamist extremists. You might as well strap a suicide vest on them and send them out in front of their enemies, because they don't mind if it comes down to that. They'll die. And those who survive will do everything they can to vilify you for responding to their provocation and killing them before they kill you. And the interesting thing about Black Lives Matter, before they got violent, they just got arrogant. They, somebody remember Black Brunch, where they would just simply walk in to restaurants that were frequented by white people and come in announcing the names of dead black people, and then sit down and stare at white folks so that they could not enjoy a meal. That didn't work well enough, so of course they upped the ante, and the next thing you know, they're burning businesses, people are dying, all this where blacks live. But because blacks were dying, I'm going to be very honest about this, and this is an indictment against every person in this country. Because black businesses were being burned and black people were being killed, America took no action against Black Lives Matter. And guess what? Antifa saw that, you know what? If you do things a certain way and act against certain people, then America is not going to do anything. And so far, they have been proven right. Donald Trump was correct. The white nationalists came out there and had their movement, their protest in Charlottesville, organized by a guy whose credentials for being a white nationalist are kind of suspect, considering he was an Obama supporter and a participant in Occupy Wall Street. I get that. But the stories are out there. They may or may not be true, but the stories are out there, and more people are accepting, because there's a history here with the left of busing people in for protests. There's a history on the left of paying people to show up for protests. There's a cut the check hashtag on Twitter that was out in 2015 specifically because the protesters in Ferguson, who were promised $5,000 a month for their time and effort, weren't getting paid, and they took to Twitter. But what happened? What happened on Missouri's campus when they forced out the president and one other university official? What was the response from America? This is the problem. You do recognize that in Portland, a new wave of left-wing militants is ready to rumble. And Portland is to Antifa what Afghanistan was to Islamic terrorists. It's a training ground. People go there and they're amongst friends and they learn the tactics, how to use black bloc, when to go after whom, how to go after them. They do all that, and then they can export that stuff to any place in the country. What are you going to do about it? Because Portland's gone. Let me just make it clear. Portland is gone. Portland, Oregon is worthless. They will not do anything or demonstrate up to this point. There may be enough Americans in Portland to finally stand up and say, this foolishness has to end. But it hasn't happened yet. It has not happened yet. Maybe you're not aware of this from the Daily Caller. Came out at the end of July this year. An armed Antifa group offers training manual on terrorism and guerrilla warfare. An Antifa organization called Redneck Revolt is advocating for revolution against the rise of fascism in the United States, as though they even know what fascism is, and they throw the term out there to cover up the fact that they are the fascists. The only thing that there really isn't anything. The only thing they lack at this point that makes them different from Mussolini or Hitler is they do not have government power at this time. If they do, they will implement every element of fascism that was seen in Italy and Germany in the 1930s. You already know how they feel about the economy. You already know how they feel about those who disagree with them. All we need is for them to be running the government, and you will have fascism in the United States. And while you're sitting back and doing nothing, they're publishing manuals to teach people how to conduct guerrilla war. Oh, there's sections in it for executions and terrorism. Now remember, arguably one of their number went out to that congressional softball practice and started shooting at members of Congress who happened to be Republican. They were chosen because they were Republican. And what was the response of Americans to the leftist organizations who are responsible for this? Well, we don't know who they are. Yeah, you do. You know who Antifa is. You know who Black Lives Matter is. You know all these roads lead back to one individual whose name is George Soros. You know exactly who's behind this. And what have you done? You've done nothing. And they are counting on you to continue to do nothing until they can embolden enough people so that they're willing to take the blowback and kill. Are you ready for that? I don't think they would do it. Really? So they're just publishing this book just for the heck of it, right? Breitbart. I know how you feel about Breitbart, some of you. And now that Steve Bannon is back at the helm, I know some of you who had negative feelings about Breitbart, those feelings have intensified. Headline, Berkeley denies anti-Marxist protest. This is from August 25th. And Antifa pledges violence. A protest billed No to Marxism that was scheduled for Sunday in Berkeley, California, has been denied a permit by the deputy city manager, who cited security concerns and national events as reasons for the denial. He told organizers of the protests who sought to gather at Civic Center Park, the site of numerous recent protests, that the totality of circumstances led to the decision. You know what the decision is? We will not intervene against Antifa. Therefore, if you're going out there, we know that somebody's going to get hurt. We'd rather nobody get hurt, but since we know we have already thrown in with Antifa, this is Berkeley we're talking about, we're not going to allow you to go. So if you show up, therefore, if anything happens to you, our hands are clean because you disobeyed us, and therefore we have no obligation to protect you. The San Francisco Gate described the protest as being staged by the far right, but according to the event's Facebook page, the group is dedicated to preserving a free nation. The Facebook page states that the group does not stand for racism, telling groups like the KKK, neo-Nazis, that they are not welcome at this event and please stay away. It also insists that the event will be nonviolent. No, there is no such thing as a nonviolent event where Antifa is involved. There will be mutual violence or there will be one-side violence, but there will be violence. So, and you've been paying attention to what's been happening in Berkeley since, actually even before the election, but Ann Coulter, Milo Yiannopoulos, others. It's a dangerous place. Straight up dangerous place. So, let me get this straight. Black Lives Matter has already killed. Antifa is publishing manuals that include sections on execution and terrorism. And I'm sorry, around the world, that means somebody's going to die. They're doing this in America. And no, if you talk about Antifa, you're not talking about Muslims. You're talking about progressives. You're talking about the folks who think Bernie Sanders is anything more than an old idiot. That's what you're talking about. At some point, what is that thing that Maya Angelou said? When somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Antifa has shown you that they are anti-American. Black Lives Matter has shown you that they are not only anti-American, they are anti-black. All the destruction that is caused by Black Lives Matter is done to black people. Have you not paid attention to that? They weren't burning up Milwaukee, Ferguson, Missouri, Baltimore. Everywhere that Black Lives Matter shows up, problems for black people go down. And I'm not talking about as in decrease. I'm talking about the problems show up. But for some reason, people who consider themselves Americans but don't have the sense God gave a dead jackrabbit haven't figured out that these people hate you and they are not even after you. They're looking beyond you to take a country away and remove the ethic by which and for which it was founded. And until you stand up and do something about it, they got a doggone good chance of succeeding. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force of internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia, which is WLBB. Well, we're going to have another protest. And interestingly enough, it means we're going to have another group of leftist dupes. What do I mean? Well, activists are set, this is from The Hill on August 26th, a 10-day march from Charlottesville to D.C. is scheduled to start on Monday, August 28th. Activists are set to start a 10-day march from Charlottesville to Washington, D.C. to confront white supremacy and demand President Trump's removal from office. The march to confront white supremacy, forgive me for laughing, is set to start in Charlottesville on the 28th, end on Wednesday, September 6th. Organizers say the march will be followed by an occupation of Washington with daily nonviolent demonstrations. Yeah, you believe that? Okay, we'll see. This is the time to confront white supremacy in our government and throughout our history. We demand that President Trump to be removed from office for allying himself with this ideology of hate, and we demand an agenda that repairs the damage it's done to our country and its people, the website for the march reads. This will be a sustained civil disobedience campaign, so bring what you need to stay. The march to confront white supremacy is being planned by a number of activist groups such as the Women's March. Oh yeah, they're nonviolent. Working Families Party, the Action Group, United We Dream, Color of Change, and others. Violence erupted in Charlottesville earlier this month at a protest against removing a Confederate statue, and a man with reported ties to white nationalists killed one person and injured dozens more by allegedly ramming his car into a crowd of counter-protesters. The attack spurred demonstrations against white supremacy around the country, including Durham, North Carolina, where protesters surrounded and toppled a Confederate statue in the days after the violence. Other cities around the country have chosen to take down or cover Confederate monuments in the wake of the Charlottesville attack. Let's deal with a couple of things here. One, Charlottesville was a setup. As soon as the white nationalists and whoever was with them announced a march, it was guaranteed that the leftists, including Black Lives Matter and Antifa, were going to be there, and there was going to be trouble, because there is no way that they can allow a peaceful march of white nationalists and therefore contain their particular or maintain their particular assertion that only they are correct. So while they want to talk about the one guy who, I don't know what was in his mind, and he needs to be taken out and dealt with, I don't know what he's doing driving a car into people. I have no idea what got into him, and to some extent I really don't care. But let's not forget the pictures we have of Black Lives Matter people with masks covering their faces and using aerosol cans as flamethrowers against the white nationalist protesters. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget that mace was being used by the Antifa and Black Lives Matter side. Let's not forget that. So if you're there to counter a rally where you're trying to be peaceful, why are you macing people? Why are you using flamethrowers against folks who are peaceful, who have not done that to you? I digress. Charlottesville, like others, is a protest, if you want to call it that, on the side of the left and maybe even on the side of the right, because the guy involved in organizing the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, as I said earlier, a former Obama supporter, had involvement with Occupy Wall Street, and then all of a sudden, after Donald Trump wins the election, he shows up on the side of white nationalists. Man, if that's not fishy, then nothing has scales. Nevertheless, on that side, you have a history of people effectively being hired to come in and protest. I don't know why you would think this is any different. I don't. I honestly do not think it is different. Nevertheless, we do have this from a Virginia television station talking about that planned march.
We are a people. We will not be replaced.
2 weeks ago today, violent Charlottesville protests ultimately claimed the life of one person and injured many others.
Nazis go home! Nazis go home!
When self-proclaimed neo-Nazis rallied to save a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Today, a coalition of students, faith leaders, and community activist groups announced that they are banding together and marching more than 100 miles from Charlottesville to the White House in what's being called the March to Confront White Supremacy. Organizers say hundreds of supporters will start walking Monday and will use Route 29 to eventually get to Washington 10 days later. Muhammad Naeem is in Charlottesville, and he's a spokesperson for the march, and he tells us this is Charlottesville's response to the hate.
Really, this is a movement. It is a march towards the arc that is more loving, that is more caring, that is more empathetic, that is diverse, and that is representative of the communities that have been affected, not only now, historically, and we cannot at all tolerate that anymore.
Cannot tolerate that anymore. Here's a question. Who in America has 10 days that they can take off from work, from school, from family, so that they can walk to another state? Oh, could it be the same type of people that were bused from different places into Ferguson? Could it be the same type of people that the citizens of Baltimore did not recognize rioting on their streets? Could it be the same type of people as the gentleman who drove up from Baltimore after having shot his girlfriend, executed 2 Brooklyn police officers before killing himself? Now remember the protesters in Ferguson, I mentioned this earlier even in this show, they were paid, or at least they were promised payment, and when that payment was withheld, they took to Twitter to denounce being stiffed. They did their work, they wanted their money. They didn't get it, or at least not up until they started the cut the check hashtag. So who do you think is going to be on this march? And they said they're going to have a prolonged occupation of Washington once they get there. Who do you think is going to be involved in that? The people marching? And where are all these people coming from? They're starting in Charlottesville. I guarantee you they're not all from Charlottesville. And who's paying for this? Well, it says, it's going to be 10 days, bring what you need. I want to know if the same folks who funded the protesters in Ferguson, in Baltimore, and elsewhere have also made promises to these people. If they don't have their own professionals who are going to partner with whatever the grassroots organization is to make sure that the numbers are nice and large, particularly when they get to the city. I wonder if the number of people who show up in Washington, D.C. are, as one would expect, going to be larger than the token group that supposedly marches the 100 miles in 10 days. I know better. than to believe that this is organic. It is not. This is a continued effort by the left, because they cannot win elections, to basically use Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals to keep up pressure, knowing that a people of weak resolve, which America is compared to what we were some 50 years ago, will relent, or at least may relent. There's a crack somewhere that'll give them a foothold that they can from which they can continue to push their agenda. Mark my words, there's a real good chance that there's going to be somebody who dies on this march or once you get to D.C. There's a real good chance that in the 10 days of marching from Charlottesville to Washington, D.C., somebody from the far right is going to magically show up and attack. It's not a guarantee. But if the reports that many are making and many others seem to believe are true, in Charlottesville, you had protesters on different sides getting off buses parked end to end. It was a show. If you think a 10-day march for nothing in particular, and I mean that, for nothing in particular, is not a stage show, is not a circus act, and is not designed to create more turmoil, asking for the removal of Trump, seriously? Because a bunch of nobodies march on the Capitol, we're supposed to take out a president. You think that's going to happen? Let me help you. No. But they have some people out there. They have some dupes. They have some paid protesters, and they're getting ready to go to work. And they're getting ready to go to work on you. You are their target. The fact that they do not believe you have the will or the resolve to face them down or to ignore them in their foolishness, they expect you to continue to respond to every action that they take. And they expect that response to be empathetic and, oh, look how hurt we are. Don't you care about us? I will say for the record, I don't give a rat's behind about you. I know what you're about. You're lying. This whole thing's a setup, and you're not out to bring peace. You're out to do something totally different. Because if you were out to bring peace, you would be denouncing everybody who disrupted it. Since you don't, I recognize what this is about. My hope is that you will too. And in the wake of this, when the reports surface that there was another Craigslist ad, that there were people who were on the march who nobody recognized when they left Charlottesville, when there are reports of violence along the way, I hope that's an if, at least the reports of violence along the way. When the violence occurs in Washington, D.C., I want you to wonder where those people came from. This isn't good. And this is not based on anything reasonable, this march. But it does have a specific purpose. They can't let this turmoil die down, and they must keep up the pressure on the government and the American people. Just mark my words. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force of internet conservatism, Talk America Radio, also on WDBQ, Talk 92 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC Talk 107.5 in North Florida. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. I always am struck by two things regarding black racism. And that's not racism against blacks. That's racism that emanates from blacks. There's two things that strike me about it. One is the persistent, ridiculous belief by many blacks that it does not exist. The second one is what this segment is about, that it shows up in the darndest places. Let me go ahead and play you this clip about a woman who should be heralded but is being criticized.
There were 891 pending adoption cases in South Carolina as of July 1st. That's according to the South Carolina Judicial Department. But today, 9 of those cases from right here in Horry County were officially closed. 9 families welcomed children as part of South Carolina's Adoption Day. One local teacher's family grew by 3 after she adopted Raphael, Victor, and Eliana. Andrea Rue started fostering children in 2006 because she has a passion for helping kids.
Children who are in need, children who need help, that's huge for me. And that's why I got into foster care. I was actually not looking to adopt. I just wanted to help as many children as I could. And you just kind of, when you know, you know.
Teacher of Science at Carolina Forest High School now has 4 adopted children. She also adopted Isaiah last year from South Africa, little cuties there. She plans to spend quality time with all 4 of her children before she starts fostering once again.
Doesn't that sound like a wonderful story? Should be. You have a high school teacher who had previously adopted a little black boy from South Africa, who now has adopted 3 more children from, well, let's remember the names here. The names of the children that she adopted are Raphael, Victor, and Eliana. 2 little boys and 1 little girl. Let me remind you that Andrea Rue is a black woman, a black high school teacher in South Carolina. If you've seen pictures of her and these children, you will recognize that the children she adopted on this occasion are not black. And as a result, she is being criticized. Now, of course, she's also getting a lot of positive response, as you heard in the news report. There was nothing negative there. But despite her openness to help children, there are quite a few folks who had negative things to say, and particularly since the children were black. Many on social media criticized Rue for the adoptions, and some of the comments were, well, they're just sad. I'll give you an idea of what some of them are. She might as well change her first name to Nanny, because she'll get called that so often she'll forget her real name. Another, I have mixed feelings. All children deserve love. They didn't ask to be here, but I couldn't do it. Black children come first in every way for me. I'll come back to that comment. She gets no props over here. Those children should be black. SMH. You picking up the So nobody sees how effing weird this is. How many black children need homes? Those lily white kids, the kids aren't white, would have been swooped up with the quickness, I promise you, if she hadn't adopted them. Black kids aren't so lucky. Shame on her. This is coonery, buffoonery, a mess. She has deep-rooted issues and wants to be white adjacent. Now, I can guarantee you that every one of those people who came for her were black. And I could almost guarantee you that each one of them were likely to be black females. And that is where this gets ridiculous. Because, see, in the mind of the liberal black, and especially liberal and progressive black females, a real black person can never do a good thing for another human being simply because they're human beings. If you would do something nice for another human being and that person doesn't have black skin, then there's something wrong with you. You're self-hating. You want to be white adjacent. You're a nanny. You're all kinds of things to these racists. I posted on Facebook. You can't be a real black person and do something nice for another human being, because that makes the Negroes and the Biscos, and for those who don't know what a Bisco is, that is black in skin color only. Those types, doing that makes them appear more quickly than zombies after sundown. And when I read of a black female criticizing another black female for helping children who needed homes just because the ones she helped weren't the color that this non-helping person would have preferred. Remember, black females are the group that kills more than 350,000 of their own children in the womb every year, rather than allow them to be adopted. But black children come first for you in every way, first in dying in the womb, right? Because nobody in America kills more children in the womb than black people, which means black women are the leading cause of homicide for blacks in this country. But you're going to criticize a woman, a black woman, for adopting a child from South Africa who's black, and for 3 other children just because they're not black? This points up how broken blacks in America have become. There's no other way to put it. What the black woman is running on in this country today is reputation of a tradition that she no longer follows. Not as a group. There are not enough Andra Roos out there. Because if there were, you wouldn't have 350,000 black children being conceived just so they could be killed. Wouldn't happen. You wouldn't have 73% of those who managed to avoid being terminated born as bastards, because that's not the mark of a woman who cares about her children. I don't care what anybody says. Everybody knows that a father is of extreme importance in a child's life, and to create a child with no father in the home? Well, what about the man? We'll deal with him. But whether or not we deal with him, that does not give you a pass. In this day and age, when birth control, contraception is free for the asking, no woman gets or stays pregnant unless she desires to do so, because the man has no power to stop her. No legal power anyway. 50 years ago, this would have been a human interest story, and you move on from there. There would not have been criticism. Not saying there wouldn't have been a raised eyebrow or two or more, but criticism for helping children who have done no harm to anyone, for having a heart to reach out to children who need help? No. But 50 years ago, we didn't have black women who kicked black men out of the black home, so they could get a check from the white government. We didn't have that. That wasn't going on. We didn't have black people spending more time in family court than they did at the dinner table sometimes. We didn't have that. We didn't have black men being found liable and responsible for child support for children that it is proven that they did not conceive. And black women are the ones who are responsible for all these things occurring. For blacks to become a people again, because right now in America, they are barely that, if at all, then the black woman has to actually behave like a caring female. Just like I don't need a man to look over at the woman with all of her shortcomings and try to justify his failures as a man. First thing I would tell a man in this situation, man, I got kids, and say, well, okay, so you're married, right? No, man, I'm not married. Then we already have a problem. I'm not letting him off the hook. When he's sprinkling babies all over the county, he's got a problem. But when you are killing children in the womb, not marrying the father of your children, and then criticizing someone who wants to make a family for other children, that is detestable behavior, and it needs to be addressed. Hey, you coming down hard on black women. You know what? 17 million children plus have been killed in the womb since 1973 by black women. Had the Klan done 1% of that business since 1973, we'd have race riots all over this nation. I'm not being hard enough, but I am calling for the women who are like Andra Rue to start looking at their fellows who don't think black children are worth bringing into the world and helping check them, because we already know that those types don't listen to men. And that's our show. May God bless and keep you. Remember your families. Pray for Andra Rue. She has 4 children. I could not tell from what I reviewed whether or not she is married, but these are all adopted children. She didn't go out there and do anything improper to bring these children into her home. Pray for people like her, because they need help so that their good deed turns into what they're trying to accomplish. And with that, we hope to be back with you next week. Do take care.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.